Well, thanks for being here, everyone. Maybe a few more will show up, but I think we can get started. So maybe some of you usually come on Tuesday nights with Mark. As you may know, he's on a 2-month retreat. Very happy for him that he can do that. And I'm happy to fill in and yeah, be here with you all. So thank you for having me. There goes my camera. I'm back. So yeah, I assume some of you have been here before, but we'll follow the same format as usual on Tuesday nights. So I'll lead a guided meditation. I'll give a talk, and then we'll have some time for discussion, ending at 8:30. So if you haven't done so already, we can begin to settle in for about half an hour of sitting time. So not rushing into our sitting time. Not rushing for a technique or some way to make the present moment be a certain way. Instead, we're maybe noticing what's already here, what's obvious in the body, in the mind. Maybe noticing our attitude in relationship to whatever's obvious. So just starting right where we are, but with perhaps a different orientation, an orientation of mindfulness, receptivity. What kind of attitude feels welcoming, maybe welcoming to everything that we might be feeling in this moment after whatever kind of day we've had. Is it possible to have an attitude that is welcoming, non-interfering, non-manipulative, open, open to the way things are for me, for you, for now? And perhaps as this welcoming attitude begins to infiltrate the mind and the body, more aspects of the body and mind in this present moment become available to be known, to be sensed, to be met. not in any hurry or with any agenda other than this attitude of openness, inclusion, maybe with a flavor of goodwill towards ourselves. And if goodwill doesn't feel accessible, and perhaps just acceptance, receptivity, just inclusion, just the willingness to include whatever's already here being known. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Practicing being. What is the kind of attitude, the kind of intention that supports an easeful being with just the ordinary, obvious experience of body and mind that's here now? What supports us settling into the way things are for me, for you, for now? Is there a way of sitting that supports ease in the body, ease in the mind, maybe relaxing muscles that don't need to be tense, maybe allowing the energy in the body to move, to settle down, to feel supported by the ground, the base of the body. And as we sit in an easeful and upright way, maybe we notice that breathing is happening all on its own, the rhythm of breathing, maybe short, maybe long. What would it be like for the breathing to feel easeful, however it is, short, long, deep, shallow? Is there a way for the breathing to be met within an easeful body? Maybe that feels like allowing the breathing to be just as it is. Maybe the breathing itself can feel like a smoothing of the energy in the body, not forcing smoothness, but simply receiving the breathing with acceptance, allowing it to be as it is. Maybe this supports ease. The body knows how to breathe, knows how to feel, how to sense. We don't need to do any of that. Instead, we can relax and receive the energy of breathing and how that affects the body. Whatever is being known, imagining that it can be known easefully, or perhaps included in a space that has no boundaries, a space of awareness that naturally includes everything that is being known, like a mirror, has no preference, no judgment, simply reflects. Perhaps this easeful awareness can include whatever arises moment to moment. Perhaps it's possible to trust this effortless awareness to receive what's being known, is it possible to settle into a receptive mode that emphasizes this natural awareness that simply receives whatever's being known moment by moment, not holding on to any experience, not pushing any experience away, but settling right in the middle of this field of awareness. Or space of awareness. Being interested in whether more ease, more settling is available, more relaxing, some muscle whether physical or mental, that doesn't need to be tensed. Settling into this receptive awareness. Let's continue in silence for about 10 minutes. Remembering again the capacity of awareness to simply recognize what's being known. If you'd like, for the last minute, you can practice with your eyes open, letting go of directing the mind to anything in particular, noticing that awareness continues on its own without our personal effort. Sitting right in the middle of our experience. Seeing if ease is possible right here. And when you're ready, you can begin to move the body, look around. Feel free to stand up and stretch for a minute if you'd like. So thanks for your practice, everyone. And it's great to see you. Even those who don't have their camera on, it's nice to see you. And for those who don't know me, I'm Gabe Keller Flores. I'm the operations manager at Common Ground and a Dharma teacher. Happy to be filling in for Mark while he's away on a 2-month retreat. So maybe you saw that I'm offering 4 weeks on this subject of calm. Maybe that intrigued you. Maybe you weren't aware of that. Um, and so I'll sort of build on week to week. So if this session is interesting to you, then you're welcome to come back. But it's drop in, so no need to commit to coming all 4 weeks. And then Win Fricky, Common Ground's co-founder and Dharma teacher, will take over after I'm done with my 4 weeks. She'll sort of continue the theme and she'll be exploring the meditative absorptions. So I sort of think of what I'll hopefully present as building into what she might present. So maybe I'll just say a little bit about why I decided to explore this theme of calm. One reason is that I think it's maybe an easily overlooked quality. In some ways, it's obvious. Maybe for people who want to meditate, some people we might think, oh yeah, I just want to get calm. I want to calm down my mind. So on some level, it's obvious. And yet on another level, the actual experience of calm, I don't know about you, but isn't always the at the top of my mind or just the most readily available experience. It feels like sort of a subtle part of our experience that we can tune into and hopefully have experienced, but that maybe could benefit from exploring what is this quality? Is it important? The Buddha thought that it was, and yet it's almost it's subtle. It's like it's not, just by its very nature, it's not the most exciting thing, right? It's not gonna necessarily get our attention the most. Maybe other qualities that we might hear about, even in Buddhism, might seem more exciting or attractive or, yeah, just more important in some ways. But just in my own practice and from the teachings, this is one of the 7 factors of awakening. So that's where it's found in terms of the lists. So it's one of the 7 qualities that supports the mind being in the right balance of mind to be able to have insight, to be able to see things in a deep way. So in that sense, it's essential. You can't have insight. You can't see things clearly without calm. It's not the only quality, but it is one of the qualities. And one metaphor that illustrates this, describing the mind as a pond or body of water. And if it's agitated in some way, you can't see through the water. So maybe you've heard this. And each of the 5 hindrances colors or distorts the water in some way. So I don't know if I actually brought the quotes with me, so I might just paraphrase it, but ill will, I believe, is like the wind blowing on the water. Desire, lust, greed is like a tinted water, like rose-colored glasses. Restlessness. Oh no, anger is the boiling water. Restlessness is the wind on the water. Sloth and torpor is, I believe, the muddied water. I might have to get back to you on all these, but you get the idea. Doubt might be the muddy one. And yeah, that's right. Doubt is the muddy one. So it's, when we have doubt, we're not clear. And then sloth and torpor is like algae that's covered the surface of the water. So the Buddha had all these images that sometimes convey what he was talking about, I find, in a really direct way. So I think that illustrates one of the functions of calm in terms of the function of that clear seeing, supporting that clear seeing, which we can extrapolate, the skillfulness of that, both in seeing the causes for suffering in our hearts and minds, but also just on an everyday level, the ability to navigate life and how we're going to be more effective and see more clearly what's skillful, even in our daily lives, if there's some measure of stability in the mind, even calm. And I think it's a provocative thing. It certainly feels against the stream or countercultural, even to value calm, even just theoretically. Like I said, I don't think it's a high value in mainstream American society, calm. Maybe we pay it lip service, but where do we put our energy? And this is, again, we could speak about the culture, but for each of us, do we value this quality, and have we found it to be useful, and what have we found supports it? Sayadaw U Tejaniya, this Burmese monk, speaking about the 7 factors of awakening, he said the first 3 are inputs that we can actually make some effort in. So the first 3 are mindfulness, investigation, interest in the Dharma, interest in the way things are. The third is energy, fourth, and then so the first three, those are something that we can apply. So we can remember to be interested in awareness, to be interested in the skillfulness or unskillfulness of the mental qualities that might be present, to be interested in the quality of energy that we're bringing. You know, is it too much energy? Are we striving for some goal? Is it too little? We just want to tune out, go to sleep. And then the following four, he says, those are effects that we actually can't make happen. So the fourth is happiness or rapture. The fifth is calm. The sixth is collectedness of mind. And the seventh is equanimity. So I think that's helpful to keep in mind as we explore calm, because I think there is, it might not actually lead to calm to want to be calm. Wanting to be calm may not actually be the supportive condition for calm. So the question is, what is the supportive condition for calm? It's okay to want to be calm, but what actually supports a natural settling? So that's what I want to talk about today. And there's probably many things that we could explore that support calm, but one that seems to come up a lot in the teachings is sila, or ethical conduct. So I want to spend most of the time today talking about sila as a support for settling, the settling of the mind, settling of the body. Sayadaw Tejaniya again talked about how sila supports calm and the collecting of the mind, and also how the settling and collecting of the mind supports ethical conduct. So they have a mutually supportive relationship. He said something like, just try to be ethical or try to really pay attention to your ethical conduct in a maybe more precise way without some degree of composure in the mind. It's hard. So just how these two support each other. There's a classical phrase which maybe is a high bar, but the Buddha set a lot of high bars, and I don't think he did it to encourage us to be perfectionist, but to inspire us about the potential of the human heart. So this phrase, the bliss of blamelessness, it's used, and maybe we can think of it as a relative experience. But I think a lot of it is less about some sort of standard that we have to meet 100% in order to start feeling good about ourselves and our conduct, and more about an orientation towards non-harming, but also appreciating non-harming and just appreciating that force in the mind. You know, so the bliss of blamelessness is whatever degree we can reflect in our life that, yes, it's true, I am trying to not cause harm. And it's very easy to cause harm. We don't even need to cause harm intentionally to cause harm. And again, it's less about never causing harm. I mean, there's all sorts of ways we cause harm just living. And so there's a lot of ways to relate to these teachings, but the way I hear how the Buddha talked about this is, again, less about meeting a standard of perfection it's more a support, in this context that we're talking about with calm and settling the mind and the mind being settled enough to see clearly. In that context, it's the settling that happens when we realize that there's an active valuing of ethical conduct for the purpose of happiness. It's not for the purpose of showing off or having um, some sort of being better than others. Oh, I'm more ethical than you are. And it's because when we can reflect and feel that we're doing our best to not cause harm, we can feel good about ourselves, basically. And that sort of active encouragement of that kind of reflection, I think maybe um, in our society, that might seem self-centered or something to think about how I'm doing my best to not cause harm and how that's a beautiful thing. But from the Buddhist perspective, this was something he encouraged. He encouraged people to reflect on their sila to arouse happiness. Now, that may be very different than some of our conditioning. When we hear reflect on our sila, what may come to mind is all the ways that we've maybe not measured up to some standard we have. But again, that's not what the Buddha was encouraging us. Certainly, it's helpful to feel where we may have caused harm, but not in order to beat ourselves up, but in order to kind of re-strengthen that part of us that in a natural way does value non-harming. So it's a beautiful thing. That's really the flavor of it in Buddhism. Sila is called the most beautiful adornment, and it has the fragrance of flowers. In terms of the world and what the world values as beauty, we can think of Sila as um, something sort of universally beautiful, no matter what we look like. If we have a commitment, again, not that we're always measuring up to it perfectly, whoever's measuring and what the standard is, but just that inner commitment is beautiful. And the Buddha said it sort of makes us safe. Again, it's all relative, but that's the direction, is that others don't need to fear me. And when others don't need to fear me, then I also feel more comfortable and safe because I'm hopefully others feel comfortable around me, and I know that people maybe aren't harboring grudges against me, so I can feel comfortable. So this is the bliss of blamelessness. And like I said, this comes up in different places as a direct support for the settling of the mind. And I think you can see why, just as if we consider maybe from direct experience, maybe I'll speak for myself, the agitation that can arise in the mind when we do something that's harmful and we feel bad about it. Again, there's a difference between then self-laceration on top of that, but there is a place in the Buddhist teachings for that concern of how easy it is to cause harm. But that leads then to to care. It leads to what's called hiri and ottappa. We could translate as a sense of conscience, a sense of discretion. There's different ways to translate it. But basically, it's this sort of the part of the mind that, I think probably through trial and error, through experience, really comes to value non-harming because we see how much trouble harming causes for ourselves and for others. And so just through sensitivity, through care, it's like that just becomes clearer and clearer, all the ways that we might rationalize, justify, even small ways that we try to take advantage of someone. It just all gets clearer and clearer, like um, you can't get away with anything on a certain level. And that's actually a good thing. We might think that that's a heavy trip. Oh, I have to constantly be watching my actions. But from just the point of view of the natural cause and effect, it's just the way things work. And um, why wouldn't we want what's best for ourselves and what's best for others? So it's coming out of a place of goodwill. All the Buddhist teachings come out of this place of wanting to alleviate suffering. So it's again, a beautiful intention. It does mean that we take responsibility for our actions. So um, it's a beautiful place in the Dharma where sort of the non-personal things just unfold. It is, it is easy to cause harm. It's not always what I intend to, but that comes into contact with the personal in the sense that, well, no one else is going to be taking responsibility for this. Sayadaw Tejaniya says, the mind isn't yours, but you're responsible for it. So that sense of, yeah, just that kind of tending, like we would tend to a garden. I'll read a little quote about the bliss of blamelessness. Knowing the bliss of debtlessness, remembering the bliss of having, partaking of the bliss of partaking, a mortal then sees clearly with discernment. Seen clearly, the wise one knows both sides. That side isn't worth 1/16th of the bliss of blamelessness. So this is kind of poetic, maybe a little hard to understand, but I think the basic point is the happiness, the bliss of blamelessness is worth more than the bliss of having and the bliss of partaking, which is a helpful thing to know because ethical conduct is easy in theory, but it's all the little places where we might say, oh, but I want that, or oh, but this is annoying, this mosquito is annoying, or something like that. So many of you will already be familiar with what's usually called the 5 precepts, which are to refrain from intentional killing, stealing, sexual abuse, harmful speech, and the use of intoxicants. So Ajahn Sucitta says that these may sound really basic and boring, hardly a sublime vision of the transcendent. They're not that decorative or grand, but the transcendent point is not what they look like, but what they call forth, what it takes to keep them, and the effects that they have on your life. So, yeah, so it's again, it's about what helps the heart settle. And apparently the Buddha never told anyone to do these things or to really refrain from doing these things. So there's something that we explore if there's that sense that, well, yeah, that seems like a useful training. It seems like that would illuminate parts of my mind that I actually want to see, even if they may not be good news, or they may not be the parts of myself that I would want others to see. But because I care about others and care about myself and don't want to deal with the problems that arise from causing harm, then this is a useful support. So we take them on ourselves. No one makes us take them on. It's something that we can take on if it feels supportive. And again, they're pretty basic, and yet, in my own experience, when I see them again, not as okay, if I pass the bar, then I don't have to think about this anymore, but um, really pointing towards a way of living that is really interested in that bliss of blamelessness, that sense that I could go to bed at night or reflect on my life and feel that happiness that, yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm really doing my best to not cause harm. As easy as it is to cause harm and as justifiable in a way, and even, yeah, socially, you know, like no one would bat an eye if I killed a bug or took something that didn't quite belong to me or, used intoxicants. Obviously, this is pretty common. And it's not even that anyone was saying that using intoxicants is inherently harmful, but the idea is that you are less, you might be more likely to cause harm because you're less in control, I guess, or less aware, you know? So really, when we talk about sila, um, the word literally apparently does refer to this abstentions as one translation, but that doesn't really inspire, so but still to think of it in that sort of simple way can be helpful, I think, as opposed to maybe translating it in a more general way like virtue, because that could mean any number of things, but just in terms of um, training, it's really on that level of can we hold back when there's some intention that isn't going to be helpful? So it's really that particular muscle. And again, in my experience, this is sort of in Buddhism, such a foundational teaching, and yet it's been really important for me in my life, and continues to be um, just that particular muscle of being able to restrain, that not all impulses need to be followed. We learn a lot in that arena. It's not the only, it's not the only teaching, but it does seem necessary to be able to restrain what's not going to be helpful. I'll read a little quote that's about this. So sometimes someone would accuse the Buddha, or someone accused the Buddha at a certain point of being someone who maybe only advocated for restraint or for non-doing. And the Buddha responded in this way. He said, I assert the non-doing of bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct. I assert the non-doing of the numerous kinds of bad, unwholesome deeds. It is in this way that one could rightly say of me, the ascetic Gotama is a proponent of non-doing, who teaches his Dhamma for the sake of non-doing and thereby guides his disciples. But then he adds a second piece. He says, I assert the doing of bodily, verbal, and mental good conduct. I assert the doing of numerous kinds of wholesome deeds. It is in this way that one could rightly say of me, the ascetic Gotama is a proponent of doing, who teaches his Dhamma for the sake of doing and thereby guides his disciples. So the Buddha sort of countered this person's allegation that he only taught restraint by saying, no, I just teach restraint of what's not wholesome, what's not leading to happiness for oneself and for others. But I teach doing of everything that is wholesome, that leads to happiness for oneself and for others. So sila really is that first piece, that break, that ability to restrain. And that just frees up, we just spend less time plagued by remorse, and maybe then we have more energy, more clarity with that sort of muscle of discernment to then, when there's a wholesome intention, then there's no problem. Do that all day, whatever that might be. So all of this, again, because there's a lot of ways, again, when we translate sila as morality or virtue, there's a lot of ways we could maybe bring in other traditions, other ideas that we might have on what that means, and am I good, am I bad? So I'll just read a little from Gil Fronsdal, just to put it in the context. The Buddha, all of his teachings were about ending suffering. So it's not so much am I good or bad, it's what is going to be leading in the direction of less suffering. And yeah, let me just read a bit from Gil Fronsdal here. So the Buddha said clearly and succinctly that the purpose of his teaching is to end suffering. But suffering is rarely a strictly personal event, isolated to the self alone. So much of the suffering we see in the world around us has distinct causes in the ways people act and speak with each other. Those who pay careful attention will see that killing, stealing, harmful sexual behavior, lying, and intoxication, acts which are often harmful to both self and others, are rooted in lust, hatred, and delusion. For the Buddha, both personal and interpersonal suffering have the same root cause. Uprooting these causes has, therefore, both personal and interpersonal benefits. When the Buddha emphasized that liberation is liberation from lust, hatred, and delusion, he was pointing to a personal transformation where one simultaneously liberates oneself and others from any deliberate harm one might cause. The Buddha's goal is therefore inherently ethical in nature. It is inseparable from how one lives one's life. It is also inseparable from how one practices the path to liberation. The path is one of steadily diminishing the strength of greed, hatred, and delusion and their influence in our personal and interpersonal lives. This is from a manuscript he has called The Equivalence of Ethics and Enlightenment, which I really loved. Really making that point in a lot of different ways that you can't separate the ethical from what we might call the spiritual, the transformational. They're really the same thing. It's not the sort of practice where it's just about outward appearance. Like I'm gonna, like repression, we might think in that way, like just gonna kind of ignore all of my selfish motivations. And maybe if no one notices, then they'll think I'm enlightened or something. So the purpose of practices like the precepts or abstentions, we could call that a kind of skillful repression, but I don't think we should use that word because of the psychological sort of connotations. We're not actually repressing, we're we're abstaining, restraining the action outwardly that would cause harm, but that actually, it's a mindfulness spell that actually helps us see those impulses. It's when we don't see those impulses to harm or to take what's not ours that they get acted out. So the 5 mindfulness trainings or precepts can serve as little reminders. Oh, yeah, I'm about to break a precept. What's going on in my mind? So going back to how all of this fits in with the settling of the mind, I want to read a discourse. Apparently, the Buddha used natural images to talk about the development of practice. He didn't use images that were synthetic in some way or made by people, you know. He would actually use those images to talk about the ways our minds kind of construct clinging and complication, like building a house, but to talk about the natural progression of the practice and awakening, he would use natural metaphors like a river flowing down a mountain. Once it fills one pool, then it flows on to the next. So there's one discourse that has an interesting title, The Discourse on the Volition Not to be Done. And it's making this point that things unfold naturally and maybe without effort, you know, no volition needed at a certain point. So let me just read this and see what else to say about it. But so this is the discourse on the volition not to be done. Bhikkhus. Bhikkhus means monks, monastics, or practitioners. Bhikkhus, for a virtuous person, one whose behavior is virtuous, no volition need be exerted. Let non-regret arise in me. It is natural that non-regret arises in a virtuous person, one whose behavior is virtuous. For one without regret, no volition need be exerted. Let gladness arise in me. It is natural that gladness arises in one without regret. And then it goes on, it is natural that joy arises in one who is glad. It is natural that the body becomes tranquil in one whose mind is joyful. It is natural to feel happiness in one whose body is tranquil. It is natural that the mind becomes concentrated in one who feels happiness. It is natural that someone who is concentrated knows and sees things as they are. It is natural that one who knows and sees things as they really are is disenchanted and dispassionate. It is natural that one who is disenchanted and dispassionate realizes knowledge and vision of liberation. According to the sutta, this is Gil Fronsdal, according to the sutta, this is a natural process because once it starts, it doesn't require any volition on the part of the practitioner. The instigating condition for this natural process is being virtuous. While the practitioner may need to apply volition to be ethical, the presence of virtue is the natural condition for the liberating sequence to begin. So, I think there's a lot to learn in the places where we apply effort and, you know, where we, you know, what is the actual useful places for some effort. Obviously, there's some effort required, but according to this discourse, you know, we might want liberation, we might want concentration, we might want happiness, joy, these beautiful states. But all of these arise naturally, not through just wanting them, but from natural conditions. And according to this discourse, it goes back to that bliss of blamelessness. And that is, luckily for us, a place where we can apply effort. And particularly, it's this intervention, this effort, this muscle of restraint. Because if we can restrain ourselves from impulses that are harmful, then we have less regret, and so on. The sequence continues. So this might seem overly simplistic, and yet to me it's empowering, and it really rings true in my experience that there is maybe more work in this area than we might think. I'm guessing all of us here are committed to non-harming on some level. And how often do we really let that in? You know, that and that it's hard, that it does take some effort, you know, maybe more effort sometimes, less effort sometimes, but that there are choices that are being made. Um, and because it's not just that, again, the outward like restraint, that's part of it, but it's also, you know, the non-regret and sort of being open to that. It's a real thing. And it's maybe hard to always notice because it's an absence. It's like Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the absence of a toothache and how regularly we probably don't notice that. But the absence of regret, the absence of remorse, again, even the relative absence of regret or remorse, it's really, again, it's less about oh, how much is good enough. But, you know, like today, we could probably think, yeah, today I didn't intentionally kill anything. I didn't intentionally take something that wasn't given to me. I didn't intentionally sexually abuse anyone. I didn't intentionally lie. I didn't intentionally intoxicate the mind. That is a mind that is safer in this world and leads to, if we pay attention, to a sense of non-regret and non-remorse, which then naturally leads to gladness. Oh, I love that gladness is next, you know, and this may be a new way to relate, to feel glad about our own, yeah, about that non-regret. But it's not even personal. It's just something we can appreciate. We could put it in the context of how rare it is, maybe, in the world. Oh, yeah, this is a beautiful thing. The world needs more people that have that ethical sensitivity because it's a beautiful thing. It leads um, to, you know, less pain in the world, and that's something that can be appreciated. So with that image of downhill, water flowing downhill, it will flow naturally if there's no obstruction. So again, then the intervention is more like what is in the way? And that's, I think, a lot of where in my life, in my experience, kind of the sila sense, the ethical sensitivity, at a certain point, it can actually be joyful. It can, you know, instead of this burden like, oh, I have to be perfect or something. No, it's like, where is there some obstruction? Where is there something, you know, some place maybe in my life that I kind of know, yeah, that's not really in line with how I want to live, but maybe it just hasn't been enough attention there or whatever we find there, some justification. And there can even be some interest, like, no, this is an obstruction to the mind settling. So we can even start to be interested as opposed to, no, I don't want to see that. You know, to see our stinginess, to see our desire to manipulate, to see our lust. It's not always the prettiest, but the kind of taking responsibility for it and not saying that I need to have a perfectly pure mind where these things don't arise, but um, that I'm someone that can be trusted to sort of tend to the garden of the mind and to distinguish between what can be allowed to bloom and what's better, you know, not watered, what seeds are better not watered, seen clearly, but not encouraged. That doesn't lead to my welfare or anyone's welfare. And how to just let that be what it is. It's just an unwholesome quality of mind. Oh yeah, I've heard about those unwholesome qualities of mind. They arise and they're not personal, but they shouldn't be followed. It's not gonna be helpful. And this is really a source of confidence and um yeah, that discernment. I'll just read maybe one more thing and then open it up, see what thoughts people might have. This is from a monastic named Piyadasi. I found an article by him on the 7 factors of awakening. He said, one who is intent on samadhi. So samadhi is the collectedness of mind. It's the 6th factor of awakening. Calm is the 5th, but we can think of them as in the same vicinity. One who is intent on samadhi should develop a love of virtue, sila, for it is virtue that nourishes mental life and makes it coherent and calm, equable and full of rich content. The unrestrained mind dissipates itself in frivolous activity. To me, there's a sense in which, we're all looking for happiness and there's a sense in which this happiness of non-regret, the bliss of blamelessness, it is a real kind of happiness. It's just more subtle. And, that sense of it being sort of a foundation or like fertile soil or like some place where the mind can rest and settle, as opposed to just always needing to be even seeking outside of ourselves for something pleasant. How much of what we really want is that ability to feel good about ourselves. And I think a lot of the exploration is, yes, the muscle of restraint, but also just appreciating that it is a beautiful thing that we can appreciate about ourselves. Um, it's almost like not being ashamed, to have that as a value. And for some reason, it can seem like a weird thing. Maybe that's just me, but it's not always the most popular thing. Well, I'll leave my thoughts there. Hopefully that was, as one professor to me said in college, relatively cogent. Um, but I would love to hear thoughts from anyone else on, yeah, what supported your mind in settling, have any sort of um, restraint in your life been helpful, been supportive? Um, yeah, just open it up. And of course, any questions, happy to answer, but also happy to just hear from your experience. And you can just go ahead and unmute. I'll turn off the recording so we don't have to worry about that.